Hello, and happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of NHLN Opinion Plus, a new weekly series coming at you every Friday. This is a space for our opinions, where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community are curious to know. Today, we are joined by Commissioner Taylor Caswell. Taylor was first appointed as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs in 2017. Taylor also serves as the Executive Director of the the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. Welcome, Commissioner Taylor, and thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have you as our first guest.
Well, I'm very excited to be here and to be your first guest.
Great. Now let's get started. I understand your position as Commissioner was created just over 3 years ago. Can you speak a little about why there was a need for your position and what the Department of Business and Economic Affairs has been doing since then?
Sure. So the Department of Business and Economic Affairs has a role of providing support for all the economic development activity for the state of New Hampshire. So everything from job creation to business recruitment to workforce development issues across the board. The other thing that we do is we have the Division of Travel and Tourism Management. So that's a huge industry, as you know, for New Hampshire. And we do all of the work in terms of developing marketing strategies for how we market the state and so on from a tourism standpoint. But the kind of neat thing is that if you think about it, those two pieces go together quite nicely. So we formed up a department that has the responsibility for all of those things that I mentioned, but also has the capability to tell a lot of people about what we're doing, how we do it, and how you can access the economy here in New Hampshire.
That's great. So you mentioned there's a combination of, you've merged basically these two sectors. What are some of those long-term objectives that the Department of Economic Affairs is trying to accomplish?
So I would say among our biggest issues right now is the development of our workforce. When we have companies that come here that are interested in being in New Hampshire for one reason or another, almost every time the first question they ask is about workforce. And so there's a lot of components that go into the workforce development strategies. You need to be able to get people to come here. You need to convince people that this is a place that has a high quality of life, which is something that those of us who live here don't need to be convinced of. But it is definitely part of the overall strategy. And I will also say that increasingly we are putting a very large emphasis on the growth of diversity in our workforce. Any company that we're working with that is looking to come to New Hampshire, that is also among the first questions that they ask. Is that how is your state, how is your community for a diverse workforce, and how can we access a diverse workforce? So I would say that that's very, very high on our priority list.
Now, it's obvious that COVID-19 has impacted local businesses and economies. We're already in the 8th month of the pandemic now, and how are local businesses in New Hampshire handling this economic impact?
Well, I would say it's kind of a mixed bag as to how they're handling it. But in the big picture, our economy is very strong right now, particularly in light of the situation with COVID, but also in comparison to other states in the Northeast. Our unemployment rate is very low. We've had a low business failure. Our numbers for business failure are really, really low. And I think that's a big reason for that is that we've been able to really rush out a lot of support, financial and technical support to our business community over the last couple of months. That's sort of the other part of my job these days with the Governor's Office for Economic Relief and Recovery, or as we call it, GOFR. That's been the entity that has been responsible for getting economic resources and financial support to the business communities in New Hampshire. So I think, we've seen a lot of growth in a lot of areas. Some of the areas that have been, I think, have had more difficulty than others are in the hospitality sector, in the restaurants and hotels and accommodations and those sorts of places that have had a really rough go for the last couple of months. And we've tried to give some focus to those businesses in particular. But overall, I think our economy is doing quite well given the circumstances.
That's great to hear. I know that with the stimulus bill, what is at stake as far as what Washington is or isn't doing with this new stimulus bill in conversations? If they pass or if they fail to pass another round, what does that mean for New Hampshire businesses, and what will the state do to fill that gap?
Well, so the struggle right now is that the resources that came to us back in the spring from the federal government to New Hampshire totaled around $1.25 billion. That's for, as I mentioned, a number of different support programs that we have sort of plugged into 50 different types of support programs that are available in New Hampshire or have been available. The challenge is that under the current law, those funds all have to be spent by the end of this year, by December 30th. We all know at this point that this is not going to be over by December 30th. So it's very necessary, for the very least, that we are able to extend that deadline to be able to maintain some of these programs past that deadline, but also to see some additional resource that can help continue these programs and support our economy, but also other state economies around the country.
I know Latino citizens are affected by COVID-19 more than white citizens. And as of July, people of color make up about 26% of the state's cases. Do you see any kind of Latino business owners that are having a harder time with this? I know you spoke about especially hospitality. Are you seeing some kind of differentiation between the population?
I have to say I haven't had an opportunity to really drill down into the data much deeper than the sectors at this point. But what I can tell you is that we just launched a new business support program funding opportunity earlier this week, actually on Monday. Those applications are going to be open through October 30th. We have the governor formed an equity response team under COVID-19 as earlier this summer, and we've been working with that organization and with members of that organization to do additional outreach into minority and Latino business communities, and also to provide opportunities for training on how to walk through the application that we have online on our website right now, so that we're trying our best to reach into as many different communities as we can to make sure that this last opportunity under the current funding for business support reaches as broad and diverse of an audience as we can get. So it's really been a critical part of what we've been rolling out here over the last few days. So in a lot of ways, getting this opportunity to talk to you today has been really part of that effort to make sure that we are able to reach those communities. And, you know, on our website, which is, we pronounce it Gopher, but it's GOFERR.nh.gov, is all the information and opportunity to ask questions around the application and the programs that we have available. So I would really urge everybody to get an opportunity, if you're a business owner or small business owner, to take a look at those programs and make sure you're taking advantage of anything that you're eligible for.
Well, that's great to hear. I would look forward to looking over that new program that is rolling out this week. I also wanted to mention that there was a recent study by Columbia University that found the poverty rate for Black and Hispanic individuals reached about 26%, and in contrast to 12% for white individuals. Now, can you speak a little bit about the unemployment rate in New Hampshire and where it stands? I know you mentioned it's low, but with those individuals who are experiencing poverty, what kind of resources are available for them to access as well?
Right. Well, I mean, we've had an expanded unemployment program in place now for several months, and that is going to continue to be available to anybody, any resident in the state of New Hampshire, as really sort of that first line. We've had a really interesting couple of months in seeing the economic impacts of this COVID-19 pandemic. It has not been I would say a very necessarily a totally straight impact. It's had impacts in different communities in different ways. In a lot of ways, our Division of Public Health has been working to sort of better understand what those are so that we can react to them better. No one's dealt with a pandemic like this before, or what the economic or health care impacts really are. So we're a little bit flying by the seat of our pants, as a lot of other states are. But I really do think that at this point, we've got a good handle on where things are, and we're able to really bring in support, both financial, technical, and public health support to as broad of a community as we can.
New Hampshire is a major hub for innovative healthcare practices and fields, making it a huge driver for economy. And is the New Hampshire healthcare system facing some budget cuts?
I think that the New Hampshire healthcare system is facing a lot of budget difficulty. As we have gone into this, it's been one of the really sort of strange components of this, is that early on, here we had a major health crisis, and we had hospitals cutting back on their services in order to be able to accommodate for what was potentially going to be a large influx of patients suffering from COVID-19. As that we went through time, and thankfully, we never really saw a huge surge, as it be, around the need there in the hospitals. But what they had to do as a result was really cut back on a lot of their day-to-day services. And those are, services that pay the bills for a lot of doctors and hospitals and nurses and so on. So they've really faced a real budget hole. The CARES Act that was passed, the federal money that came through, several $100 million, I don't know off the top of my head, has been directed towards the medical community and hospital community to help support them through this difficult time. They continue to have challenges, and that's part of what I do on a regular basis, is interact with many businesses, but particularly in our healthcare sector, to make sure we're getting them the resources to be able to provide the basic level service that people expect.
Can you speak a little bit about those resources that you share with towards those healthcare systems?
So there are multiple healthcare programs under the CARES Act, some of which my organization is responsible for, and a good portion of which are responsible for the department over at the Department of Health and Human Services. And then there are also a number of other programs that came directly from the federal government to the hospital communities to support them financially as we went through the COVID crisis. So I don't have all the exact numbers here in front of me, but it's been a substantial resource that's been directed towards those hospitals, and in particular, a lot of rural hospitals that faced, have an even smaller sort of patient count, but also have a smaller operation. But if they're not there, there's no basic health care that's available in those rural areas of the state. So I would say that it's been definitely one of the most difficult areas that we've had to deal with. But again, I really do think that at this point, services are available, hospitals are open, and we're managing the COVID transmission rates, at least as it stands today.
Well, that's good to hear. I know you mentioned earlier, tourism is a big part of the economy in New Hampshire. How has the pandemic, caused a steep decline in tourism? What kind of change has occurred?
That's been interesting. It actually has not created a huge decrease in the amount of tourism that we've seen. I think we see a lot more tourism from the immediate New England area, whereas over any normal year we would have a lot of people visiting from all over the country or from overseas. Those people obviously are not coming in the numbers that we're used to, but we are seeing a lot of tourism coming from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maine and Vermont, but also really from New Hampshire. I think a lot of people who weren't or made the choice not to travel somewhere else for their vacation this summer maybe stayed local and ended up taking advantage of what we have here right in their own home state. So I would, one of the things that we do to sort of watch all of this are the traffic numbers that go through the toll booths on our borders, and that gives us, not an exact count, but a pretty good indication as to how we're doing. I would say over Labor Day and Columbus Day long weekends, we were pretty close to 2019 numbers in terms of the number of people that were coming here. So overall, the tourism season went really well. Maybe it wasn't as spread around the state as it might normally be in a regular year. A lot of activity in the Lakes region, in the North Country, and the Seacoast. But thankfully, the pandemic relented just a little bit through the summertime, and I think people did a good job socially distancing and wearing masks and so on, and that kept the rates down, and we were able to have a pretty decent tourism season given the circumstances.
Well, that's good to hear. I think that's all the time we have for now, but I do want to thank you again for taking this time today to speak with us.
I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to come back whenever you'd like.
Awesome. We'll hold you to that.
Okay, great.
Tune in next week for another episode. Follow us on Twitter at NH Latino News and Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Abigail Redondo with NHLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.